Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. Looks like the room's filling up. I appreciate all of you stopping in here for the live stream. And those of you that are going to watch this on replay on YouTube, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So this is our 13th webcast together, lucky number 13. I was looking back at some of the earlier webcasts, and I was pretty envious of my haircut at the time, because it's getting tougher and tougher to look presentable without getting any kind of haircut or trim over the past 3+ months. So the good news is in New Jersey, the barbershops are going to reopen on June 22nd, a little more than a week away. The bad news is I already went and checked because it's all going to be appointment only. I went and checked my guy, went to his website. He's already booked solid through July 3rd. So unfortunately, this hair situation is going to need to last a little bit longer. It is what it is, I guess. There's worse things to be worrying about at this time. So if you're watching today on YouTube, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. What that does is that allows the YouTube mysterious algorithm to know that people think this is good content when it comes to sports betting, casino comps, sports betting education, things like that, the different tags that I have on this video. So I appreciate it when you guys give it a thumbs up. It helps draw in other viewers. And then also, please consider subscribing. You'll get alerted to whenever I put a new video up. There's going to be some new videos next week. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I appreciate any subscribers and help kind of get this word out and further the message. So today we're going to talk about casino comps. Now, this is not only casino comps for casino players, but also for sports bettors and how sports bettors kind of go about this world of casino comps. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting presentation. It's a little bit outside of the norm in what I've been doing. It's not so much about sports betting education. It's more about casino education, how to kind of get the edge in a casino environment. So hopefully it's interesting to you guys to watch. I will say that next week is a return to the happy hour. We're going to have a happy hour. Maybe a little beverage involved, and have some guests. And I think you're going to like the guests. I'm going to tease that right there. I'm going to tell you the guests at the end of this episode, or at least after the presentation. But happy hour returns next week, and I think you're going to like it. Okay, let's get started. So today we're talking about, casino comps, which are short for complimentaries. These are the things that casinos give players to earn their loyalty, as well as to entice them to play more. We're largely going to be talking about comps in a casino setting, not mobile or online. So while there are incentives given to mobile and online players, like promos and bonuses and whatnot, we're more focusing on the brick and mortar casinos today. So for sports bettors, comps don't come easy. Casinos aren't willing to give sports bettors more than just some drink tickets or the occasional buffet. And that probably has to do more with their lack of certainty when it comes to the profitability of sports betting for the casino, more than anything else. After all, a bettor wagering on a game at -110 has nearly the same theoretical casino house advantage as someone wagering on red or black at roulette. So while there are plenty of games in the casino that have less of a house edge for the casino, they still feel it's a little too risky to give too many comps away to sports bettors. And adding to that, though, is that a lot of sports books are not owned by the casino that houses them. They outsource the sportsbook operation to another company, like William Hill, for instance. So there's a business disconnect there, and that sometimes is why sports books don't comp players much beyond drink tickets. So therefore, let's get this out of the way early. Sports bettors can't expect much in terms of comps when it comes to their sports betting. We talked last week about the drink tickets, and that's pretty much the extent of it. However, it doesn't mean you don't get to enjoy comps like other gamblers do, despite your primary focus being on the casino sportsbook. If you want to take a vacation to a destination that has multiple sports books or betting apps, for instance, Las Vegas or Atlantic City, you can greatly subsidize the cost of your trip by knowing how comps work. getting a free room or a greatly discounted room. That, for instance, is one of the things that can happen. Perhaps you get a few cheap meals, maybe even get some free money to play with while you're there. These are all attainable comps that can be had by just about anyone as long as you know how the system works. And before we get too far, I do want to give this important disclaimer. Don't chase comps. Comps have a law of diminishing returns. Once you get to a certain point, leveling up beyond that doesn't really gain you much more than the satisfaction of having a slightly bigger room or a nicer meal. If you obtain a free room, does it really matter whether it's 400 square feet or 4,000 square feet? Especially if you're there just to bet sports. Take it from someone who has flirted with the high roller lifestyle in Las Vegas. The level of play necessary to maintain those comps ultimately eats into whatever advantage you get from having the plush perks of luxury. Okay, so those disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about how comps work. And comps have a twofold purpose. They incentivize the player to play more, and they incentivize the gambler to gamble more in return, and also to return to that casino. They build loyalty. So in other words, to get on their radar, you're going to need to gamble a little bit in the casino. Now, if you're a sports bettor, but you're not a gambler and you do not like casino gambling, well, good. You probably have a good future ahead of you. However, if you are trying to become a winning sports bettor because you want to find ways to lose less in a casino, you're probably already pretty familiar with how casinos work. So first things first, we need to get a player's card. This is how the casino will track you when you play a machine, when you play a table game. This card basically tracks your play. You insert it into the machine for a machine game, and you give it to the dealer at a table game, and they track all your play. Now, the next thing you're going to need to know is you're going to need to know how to gamble. Now, in casinos, there's a very simple paradox. The easier something looks, probably the more house edge it has. The more complex something is, the less house edge it has. So, for instance, sorry about that, dog barking. What's the simplest form of casino gambling? Well, it's slots. You're just smashing a button. Well, slots have about an 8 to 15% house edge. And for instance, roulette is pretty simple as well. You have basically a choice of red or black or choose a number. And that has basically a 5.5% hedge, 5.26%. And then what games are more complex? Well, for a lot of people, they would say a game that I never understand what's going on is Baccarat. Well, Baccarat has a very low house edge. It's just 1%. Some people look at craps and they go, I have no idea what's going on there. Well, craps has a very low house edge. If you're betting the pass line, it's just about 1.4%. Blackjack is one where the game seems simple, but you know that there is some tricky strategy you need to learn, basic strategy. And if you learn that basic strategy, well, you can get the house edge down to just about 0.5%. So that said, there are different types of games, and each one has its own theoretical edge, and that plays into how much the casino is going to comp you in return based on what they expect you to lose at the game you're playing. So there's also different types of comps. There are discretionary comps that can be handed out by a host or a slot club based on your action. And then there are comps that you earn that you can directly yourself comp yourself through reaching different thresholds in your play. In general, though, comps in the casino industry follow these percentages: 10% of your actual loss or 25% of your theoretical loss. So now the 10% of your actual loss is pretty straightforward, 10% of what you actually lost. The 25% of your theoretical loss might be a little bit more confusing to a player to understand. You first have to realize what the theoretical loss is for the various games in the casino, such as the ones I kind of just described. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but let's look at this chart here, and I think this will help you kind of figure it out a little bit better. So this is the amount needed to gamble to generate $100 in comps. As you can see, there's not much you have to gamble in terms of slots to generate that $100 in comps. But if you work your way up that list there, when it comes to blackjack, you might have to gamble 9 times as much. And very simply, that's because blackjack probably has 9 times less of a house edge than the slots do. Now, conversely, you can look at this and you can say, well, if the comp percentage is 25% of your theoretical loss, this would be $400 in theoretical loss. So you can look at this chart and say, this is how much gamble I will give in order to lose $400 theoretically. So that's just very little on slots. You might gamble $5,000 aggregate, at maybe 50 cents a spin. But meanwhile, with something like Baccarat or Blackjack, you might be able to gamble $50,000 worth of coin in wagering in order to reach that $400 theoretical loss point. So that's important to keep in mind, is that different games have different theoretical loss points, and that affects how you will go about getting comped in the casino and which games are going to comp you faster than others. So let's get down to the brass tacks here, though. How much can you expect to get? Well, it depends on where you're playing as well. So obviously, the nicer the resort, the more play will be required to generate comps. Take into consideration your needs when it comes to generating comps. Are you looking for a room to crash in after betting college football on a Saturday, only to get up in the morning, race down to the sports book and bet NFL football all Sunday? Or are you planning to stay for a whole week and live life as a professional gambler? Or is it just you that needs this comp? Or is it you and the boys? Or is it you and the wife or the girlfriend? That can greatly differentiate on what type of comps you want or need. For instance, you probably want a nicer accommodations if you're bringing your significant other. You also need to plan ahead, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next section, but you want to be earning comps on one visit and then spending comps on a future visit. So having future trips in mind and when you're going to be back and what you're going to be doing is always a good idea. However, most importantly, it depends on the story you tell. And this isn't a story that you tell to anyone. This is a story that is told based on your action. You see, you see these players' cards, excuse me. You see these players' cards are writing a story that tell the casino algorithms your worth to them. And in many cases, casinos use your average daily theoretical loss, to gauge how valuable you are to them. For instance, let's say that on your only visit to this casino, you play a game like roulette. And it has, of course, that 5.26% house edge, and you wager through $1,000 in an hour. That may seem like a lot, but really that's only $20 a spin for 50 spins, and you'll reach that $1,000 of aggregate wagering in an hour. Well, your theoretical loss, based on that 5.26%, would be $52.60. And if you play for 3 hours, that means your theoretical loss was approximately $156 on that day. Now, the casino would expect to win that $156 amount. And if that's all the action you give them, and that's all they have to base it on, they're going to say, okay, well, he's worth $156 a day. Well, we can use that 25% of theoretical as the rate at which we're going to comp him. And that works out to $39 a day that they would look to comp you. Now, let's say that a room in this casino resort costs the casino, their cost, $50 a night. Well, that would get you, that would mean that your $39 a day wouldn't quite reach that $50. But remember, if you stay one night, you're there for 2 days. So they multiply that $39 by 2 days. And they say, okay, well, that's $78 we expect to be able to comp this guy. $50 of that is a room. Boom, that works. And they invite you to come back and stay the night for free because they know that, they're coming out much better on the deal if they do that. Now, theoretically, of course, their win rate over those 2 days is that $156 a day. And so, they're still giving you back $78 in comp value, even though, you're going to probably lose $312 or more or less. But as you can see, there's an assumption there, right? And their assumption is that what you did on day one is indicative of what you're going to do each day. And we're going to get into why that's important in a little bit. Now, the other thing that some casinos do is they look at your trip average. And this is the same as the daily average, but based on several days of play. And when the system sees you inactive for perhaps 3 to 5 days, it'll end your trip and compute the average. Now, for someone who is visiting a city like Las Vegas, this is more prevalent because the amount of gambling you might do over the course of several days differs than what you might do in one individual day. And lastly, casinos do look at your win-loss. Remember I said that casinos will look to comp 10% of your actual loss. Well, perhaps the roulette session that we talked about earlier didn't go well, and that player lost $1,000 after 3 hours instead of the expected $156, because variance happens. The casino may put the comp value there at $100 rather than $39 because that was their actual loss, $1,000, 10% of that being $100 rather than the theoretical loss. And casinos don't generally extrapolate actual loss moving forward, though. They don't expect you to vastly exceed the theoretical loss each time you visit. So actual loss comps tend to have a much shorter shelf life. They're usually good for maybe the next visit or maybe even that same day. But of course, the shorter your bankroll, the more likely you are to have an actual loss that exceeds your theoretical loss because you bottom out of your bankroll prematurely. But that's more gambling theory. Because at this point, you're probably saying to yourself, Jack, how do I get to work the system to get the free stuff? Let's get to the meat of the issue here. Well, let's get down to it then. Let's get in line for the free money. So first, you need to choose your game and be cognizant of what you're giving up when you're playing this game. You can give up very little by playing a game with a low house edge like blackjack, baccarat, video poker. However, you need to play through quite a lot to gain enough theoretical value for the casino to appreciate your action. That either means hours of play at lower stakes or maybe less play at higher stakes, but it still means a lot more time investment into the entire process. Now, myself, I play video poker, but video poker has a strategy to learn. You need to know how to read pay tables. You need to know which denomination is best for you. It's a whole other discipline than sports betting, or it's a whole other discipline of casino play, in the same way that sports betting is a whole other discipline of gambling other than casino action. But if you wanted to get involved in video poker, it does have a very low house edge as well. And then, of course, if you decide to take a blended approach where you just kind of just float around the casino and do whatever you want to do, that's fine as well. Just be sure to keep track of your action to estimate your theoretical worth to the casino as you go along. Now, notice I'm never saying that you need to gamble X amount or Y amount of hours, because that part is all very flexible. The important key part to remember here, though, is that the check is in the mail. And what I mean by that is, remember I said that comps have two purposes. They incentivize you to play longer, and they incentivize you to come back. Well, the coming back part will come in the form of mailed offers that are the result of your play. And these are basically prospective comps that the casino is willing to entice you with in order to get you to come back and play and maybe exceed the level of play that you played last time that they already associate with you. And this is why our roulette player example earlier is getting an offer to stay multiple nights rather than just one night, because they think, well, maybe he's going to lose this $156 a day over 3 days, 4 days, and they're willing to kind of give you the rope there to hang yourself with. But the mailed offers, or the emailed offers in some cases, they're the ones you want. They're the ones that are going to have probably the things that you're going to be basing your next trip on. And they're going to be the offers that you're going to use when it comes to your next trip in order to subsidize your sports betting trip. So you do need to be a little patient, because the cycle of play from when you gave them the action to when marketing actually mails out your offers could be 2 to 3 months. So you need to be able to kind of wait for that. You can't go in on a Monday and expect to then get mailed an offer for the following weekend. It just doesn't work like that. So The next thing we need to talk about, though, is how to cultivate your story, right? So remember the story your player's card tells. If the casino is basing your offers on what they know of you, then those casinos are based on your daily play, your trip play, whatever. Make sure that what they know is relatively juicy for them. And you can do that by gambling your brains out for just one day of your visit, rather than gambling a little bit here and there over the course of your visit. Play heavily on just one day, and let that be all they know. Each time you use your card for anything thereafter, you're going to be diluting your average. Just remember that. So focus all of your play in one casino, the casino that you want to stay at in the future. Base that all in one day, and go from there. So for that in mind, with that in mind, for instance, let's talk about some ways that you might be diluting your average unknowingly. Well, suppose your casino that you put all this play in, you visited a few days later and you say, well, I'm not going to play today, though. I know to hold my average high, but they have free parking if you use your player's card, and you go ahead and you swipe your player's card. Well, you just basically tricked yourself. You told them that you were there, and so that $5 you saved on parking may have cost you several $100s in offers down the line. That's one of the things you need to remember. If you use your player's card to maybe get the 50% off at the buffet or whatever the benefit is, you're also tripping yourself. So if you're going to use those benefits, you got to use them on the day you played or later when you're looking to actually burn through your comps. So then the next thing is you want to be able to rotate your comps as well. And what this means is that you stay at one place and you play at another for that one day to earn up the comps. And then that's the place you stay at in the future. And then you pick another place that you play at strongly for one day, and you use those comps on the subsequent visit, and you just kind of keep daisy chaining all along. So basically, you'll be burning through your comps at one property, seeding them at the other. And the thing is, though, that most casinos factor in the previous 365 days of action, whether you used comps there or earned comps there. So if you have enough places over the course of the year, you can probably get around town and go to all these different places and then go start the cycle over again. And then after 1 year, hopefully your play has fallen off the board and you can use it again. Give them one full day of play again and go from there. But don't be afraid to burn out your comps at a casino once you have the offers that you intend to use. Just be aware that once you do start burning through your comps, you can't expect the same level of treatment there for a while. So typically, the marketing cycle that you waited out before your first offers arrived is the key to knowing how long your current offers, your current comp status rather, will last. So if it took 3 months for the offer to arrive, it may take 2 to 3 months of using these comps before your comps lowers down and the offers dry up, so to speak. And if you're using this to cover going to Vegas 3 to 4 times a year to bet sports, then absolutely burn out the comps at one place while you earn them at another, and then churn through that. In fact, I put together kind of a quick little sample Vegas trip rotation here for you. So you start out early in the NFL season, and you have maybe a trip with a couple friends of yours, some guys, and you stay 3 nights downtown, and you found a promo rate of $99 a night, not hard to find downtown. And you spend 1 night gambling heavily over there at the D, Derek Stevens' place. And then in a few months, he's opening up Circa, and that beautiful 3-story sports book that looks like they're going to have. And you get an offer for come out in January for the NFL playoffs, and they're giving you 3 free nights at Circa, and you're like, well, that's great. So you go out there for 3 free nights at Circa and enjoy yourself in the huge sports book. And you go down to the Strip one night and you play heavily at the Flamingo. Well, in 2 months' time, you get an offer to come back from March Madness, and you can stay at Bally's, which is another one of the Caesars Resorts properties there in Vegas. And you can stay free for 3 nights at Bally's, and you not only get a comp room, but you get a March Madness viewing party invite, and they're gonna have open bar and buffet and everything. And so you're like, wow, this is great. I'm gonna go back in March, watch March Madness, do it all again, and you spend 1 night from that trip maybe down at MGM and you gamble heavily there. and they send you an offer. And of course, in the summertime, things are a little bit dead in Vegas. So their offer in the summertime is usually a little bit better. And you decide, well, for the summer trip, I'm going to take my wife. So let's stay at someplace nice. So you get an offer from the MGM resorts, and you can stay at Mandalay Bay, for instance. And maybe you have 3 comp nights there and maybe a pool cabana. And of course, they get that beautiful pool, wave pool, beach, everything really nice. The wife enjoys it, and you get enough good faith with your wife that she's like, oh, well, you can go back anytime and go with your boys and hit the NFL weekend. This was nice. So on that trip with your wife in the summer, you spend one night gambling at Treasure Island, and now Treasure Island's a little bit of a step down from Mandalay Bay, but your goal here is that when you go back in the early NFL weekend ahead, you go back and stay at Treasure Island, and maybe you get your 3 nights comp there, and you kind of start the cycle over again. And so one of those nights you go downtown and you go to the D, and you put your play in there because it's been a full year since you were last there, and the cycle repeats itself. And so there you see, you kind of have just kind of worked the system all around town while not having to gamble heavily repeatedly at any one place over the course of your 3 or 4 day trip. You just really had to put in 1 day of gambling instead, and you moved around. So let's summarize kind of what we went over here, and that is first we learned how comps work, the rough percentages that casinos give, who they give them to, what different games you need to play in order to get comps, and how much play needs to be put in there. We talked about how much you can get from comps, and based on the game you're playing, based on the situation with the casino. And then we talked about some actual plans on how to get free stuff from the casinos, how to work the system, so to speak. Now, if you need some more kind of information on this, I do have some recommended reading here for you. 3 books that pop into mind. And the first is Comp City. This is Max Rubin's book. It's kind of the best book ever written about casino comps. It is a little dated. It was updated a few years back, but it is a little bit dated. But a lot of what he says here is really good. There's a lot of tricks in there. For instance, if you're at a table game, you're rated because the pit boss comes around and kind of looks and sees how much chips you have and sees what your average bet size is. Well, if you can time it so that you're betting more when the pit boss looks at you, and you make it so that the stack on the table isn't much and they think you're losing, those sort of things help get you better comps. Max Rubin talks about all of it in his book. I think there's a Kindle version now that's pretty cheap, so go ahead and check that out. It's definitely worth the read, even though it's a little bit more dated. The second one is Gene Scott's book, The Frugal Gambler Casino Guide. This is a book. Gene Scott's kind of this famous, she's called the Queen of Comps, and she basically talks about all the kind of ways you can do kind of a low roller guide to Vegas and the free things you can get and how to work the system. It's a good book, very entertaining. And if you don't have a big budget, this is probably the best book to start with. And then the other book I have here is Steve Gorey's American Casino Guide. 2 things are good about this book. One, it's basically an encyclopedia of all the different casinos in the country. So you can kind of maybe plot out your trip if you're going to go out to Iowa, for instance, and float around the casinos there, or Colorado with all their new sports books. American Casino Guide will tell you where all the casinos are, who owns them, what kind of games they have. And then there's a bunch of match play coupons. The second thing is a bunch of match play and free play coupons in the back of the book that you can use at casinos all around the country. Get you a little bit of free stuff right from the start. So that's a really good book to use. And he comes out with an updated guide each year. I'm not sure when exactly that guide comes out, but we're midway through the year, so this is still a good time to get the 2020 guide as casinos are reopening. So that does it for the presentation. I wanted to keep it a little shorter than we did last week. So we're going to switch gears into the Q&A if people have some questions. And while we kind of wait for those questions to queue up, I'm going to talk a little bit about next week. So next week, we're going to have the happy hour format again. And we're going to have return of Spanky and Rufus Peabody. They're going to join me. And we're going to have a Zoom room like we did before. We're going to have live on YouTube. We're going to be live on Periscope, the whole thing. And And we might have one more guest as well. We're still working on those details, but that's going to be next Friday. The announcement will come out on Monday. You guys can see it. You guys can know about it now, though. And it should be good. Those guys are kind of getting back to work, so I wanted to kind of squeeze them in one more time. We could have gone for 2 hours more the last time, so wanted to get them in this time. Talk a little bit more before they head back to work. I don't know if our schedules are ever going to align again, where we can get all three of us on the same webcast. So that'll be fun. And then also this week, I am probably going to put out the next episode of Making a Modeler. This one's going to be about regression analysis, and I've begun work on that now. I'm going to be filming it this weekend, editing through next week. So hopefully by middle of next week, the 4th episode of Making a Modeler will come out, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them at this time, and we can talk about it. It doesn't have to be on comps if you don't want to. It could be on sports betting in general if you'd like. Sorry, let's switch back to this view. Okay, what do we got here? All right, so a couple people have commented. Caesars Properties give me $1 per 1,000 bet when I use the Total Rewards card, and yeah, that's not bad. I mean, getting $10 for $10,000 a bet is not that great, though, right? So, different places they'll give you something nominal in terms of comps for using your card when you're doing sports betting, but for the most part, you're not gonna get much from it. RD also says, the Venetian just sent me a whole bunch of offers, haven't received or played in over a year. Yeah, and that's the thing about the Vegas market right now. It's going to be a little bit desperate. They're going to be sending out a lot of offers to a lot of people. So maybe they kind of queried their database and said, anyone who hasn't been here in over a year, let's see, what we can do to get them in the door. And that's why a lot of people are going to be getting offers from places they were like, oh, I haven't been there in a long time. So it doesn't look like we have many other questions here today, and that's fine too. It can be a little bit of a shorter episode this time. If there are any other questions, go ahead and put them in there. But if not, we're gonna wrap it up shortly here. I do think that there's a good chance that with sports picking up again over the next few weeks, there's probably going to be a little bit more focus on sports betting and what's going on with sports betting and legalization in various states. So if your state is among them where it's kind of been on the fence, I haven't seen much movement, we might see movement over the next few weeks. And especially as we get into the fall when legislatures are back in session, we'll probably see some different states moving forward. And I think that's good, kind of push the needle when it comes to sports betting. Okay, actually, a couple of questions did come in here. So the Iceman asks, I am new to the sports scene, but to place a bet, you need a player's card if you're in a casino, or can you get away without a player's card? Yes, you do not need a player's card specifically. Sorry, I'll put your question up there on the screen. It varies by casino. So in other words, and by sportsbook. Some sportsbooks require a player's card if you pass over a certain threshold. Typically, that threshold is a couple $1,000s. William Hill is as low as 1,000. But if you're not betting that big, no, you don't need to use a player's card. You don't need to have them know who you are if you'd rather remain anonymous. And like I said, with betting sports, you're not going to get a whole lot of comps anyway. So using your player's card, especially if you're a sharp bettor, sort of has unintended consequences in kind of letting them identify who you are. So the less amount of time you can identify yourself at the casino is better when you're a sharp sports bettor. I was more talking about using your player's card only when you are gambling in the casino. That's sort of what that was going at. Bro KGB says, new Colorado better here. With most casinos here partnering with outside firms for their sports betting, do you know if comps can be earned via their mobile apps or just in-person betting? No casino that I know has tried to do something where they're comping bettors in their mobile apps and comping them into the retail sports book. So in other words, like cross-marketing. It seems like it should work, but nobody I know that's been doing it. And especially in Colorado, there's none of those casinos are going to be taking a native role in sports betting. They're all outsourcing it to other operators. So there's going to be that disconnect, I feel, in Colorado. But that doesn't mean that if you go to, you know, Black Hawk or Cripple Creek or any of those casino towns in Colorado, that you don't want to give them a little bit of action in the casino, and therefore they can then send you some offers. And you can, you know, also spend time in the sports book. But in terms of like betting in the mobile app and getting a retail casino to comp you, it just doesn't seem to be much of a cross market there for whatever reason. Scar22 says in Illinois, they're taking his card even at a $500 bet. And yeah, that happens. You know, I've talked about that in the past as well, is if you ask them why, they say, oh, this is know your customer and anti-money laundering reasons that we need to do this. The trouble is that FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, dictates, it gives guidance rather, that $3,000 is the limit where you need to know your customer, not 500, not 1,000. So they're kind of, you know, bastardizing the rules of FinCEN in order to kind of know who their customers are for their own benefit, not for anti-money laundering concerns. Javier says, hi, Jack, from Miami. Well, hi, Javier, in Miami. Thanks for joining. Okay, so if there are no other questions, we're going to probably wrap it up here. But thank you for joining me on this episode. And next week, we're going to have the happy hour. That one usually runs a little long. We're going to have Rufus and Spanky, maybe even another guest. I don't know. I'm still kind of preparing that. But if you enjoyed this, go ahead and give it a like in the thumbs up below and consider subscribing. I appreciate all of you that subscribe to the channel. And then you'll get notified whenever these new videos come out. You can jump into the live streams then. Though until next week, though, have a good week, and I'll see you next Friday.